Welcome to Surrender School. Okay. Surrender School's mission statement. At Surrender School, we recover to share 12-step and other supportive recovery solutions with those who want a healthy relationship with food. We are not an official 12-step meeting, but we do try to adhere to the spirit of the traditions. If Surrender School has helped your recovery in any way, please consider donating. There's a donate button at the bottom of our landing page on the website. And let's take a moment, maybe take a couple of deep breaths. Feel your feet on the floor, feeling present in the room. God, help us to set aside everything we think we know, to leave space for what we have yet to learn. Okay, today's topic is the importance of personal and spiritual growth. Now, we all know that, quote, elimination of our overeating, binging is but a beginning, unquote. We all know that. We've read it 100 times in the big book. But why isn't abstinence enough? Like, why can't we just get abstinent and then move on with our lives? Isn't overeating and binging the real problem? Won't everything be fine if we can just stop eating? The short answer is no. Overeating and binging was never my problem. They were the answer to my problem. My problems were many. History of childhood trauma, emotional immaturity, definitely spiritual immaturity. Food was never my problem. It was the solution to life. So, you see, becoming abstinent did nothing to address my real problems. Abstinence just sets the stage to be able to work on these real problems. So if you think abstinence and weight loss are your destination, if that weight loss and abstinence are enough, you may make it to your destination. You may make it to your goal weight, but you won't be able to stay there. You will only be passing through. How many times have you gotten abstinent, lost your weight, and then only to lose your abstinence, gain your weight back? I'm not being snarky. This is an honest question. And it's an honest question I had to ask myself. Why wasn't being abstinent enough? Why wasn't abstinence and weight loss enough? So I've quoted the big book several times so far in our 14 days together. And most of the quotes are about throwing out lifelong conceptions and experiencing huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. I quote those sections in the big book all the time. They all suggest the importance of continued personal and spiritual growth. Not just spiritual, but personal too. Okay. But here's the big book quote on page 35 that's really at the heart of today's topic. Bill is talking about Jim, the car salesman guy. Quote, all went well for a time, but he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. To his consternation, he found himself drunk 6 times in rapid succession, unquote. It is a spiritual truism that we either continue to grow or we die. We are either moving toward our higher power or toward the food. Those are really the only choices for us. We're either moving toward our higher power or towards the food. Okay, so let's say we accept this truth that we can stay abstinent if we don't continue to grow both personally and spiritually. Okay, now what? How do we go about growing? Well, the first and most obvious answer is through the steps. But I found I had to have a certain attitude toward working them. They aren't something to be endured and resentfully gotten through, like there's some pot of gold at the end of the rainbow there, and we just want to move through as quickly as we can and get this crap off our back, and so we can have, the lucky leprechaun pot of gold. And that so I found I had to have a certain kind of attitude, and I want to share that with you. I'm not saying this is the attitude you should have, but I want to give you an example of what I'm talking about here. So I'm going to go by step. So step one is the starting point of all growth. First, we admit we're powerless over food. Then we begin to see we are powerless over almost everything. People, places, things, and situations. It was a moment of deep and utter vulnerability for me. Before program, I was a control freak and sometimes still am. And it was a kind of weird self-importance. That kind of weird center of the universe-ness. I may not have thought of myself as the best, but I did the reverse pride thing a lot, where I thought of myself as the worst. So here's the rub of step one. We also admit that our lives are unmanageable, not just our food life, but our lives. So not only does our food have to change, but our lives have to change. Step two. In step two, we begin to see that the way we have been living is insane. Thinking that our alcoholic foods will be the solution to our chaotic and unmanageable lives on the one hand, and then thinking that not eating our alcoholic foods will be the solution to our chaotic and unmanageable lives on the other. One, we think eating is the answer, and the other, we think not eating is the answer. And eating is just a symptom. It's not the true root of the problem for us. So this is where we first admit that we need help, some kind of a greater power, however you define it, is necessary to see through the insanity. Now, step three really presented some serious problems for me. I really don't resonate with the way step three is written on page 59, the list of the 12 steps, but pages 60 through 64 set off a bomb in my head. The whole issue of control, trying to control people, places, things, and situations, trying to force life to do what I wanted. This was the root of my addiction. The absolute bedrock upon which my whole insanity was built was trying to control everything and everyone, not just myself, not just my food, but everyone and everything and every situation. And I needed a guide, a teacher, to help me learn how to let go of control. And step three was my decision to seek this teacher. And for the most part, this teacher is my higher power. Now, this is the step where I began to really start to get to know my own insanity. I got to look at it up close and personal. All of the ways I tried and failed to control things, how I misused my will and hurt others and myself. A lot of people really get bogged down here. They get bogged down and flail around in the muck and the shame and the everything else. That is not the point of this step. So, self-flagellation is not the point of step 4. The point is simply our higher powers helping us see more clearly what is not working in our lives. We don't have to feel guilty about it. We don't have to feel bad about it. We don't have to feel shame about it, or we don't have to spend a lot of time justifying it, which is what I would do. It's just what doesn't work, Linda. What doesn't work? Let's take a look at it. And this shows us where the direction of our growth lies. We first start seeing in step 4 where we really need to grow. Now, step 5 is often seen as confession and a dose of humility. Seeing it that way didn't really work for me. It felt too much like punishment. So this is how I choose to experience step 5. Sharing my inventory with a trusted fellow is how I experience compassion for myself. I allow myself to feel and receive the compassion from my fellow traveler who's listening to my step 5. And then that compassion works its magic, and I begin to feel compassion for myself. So I allow myself to receive the compassion of the trusted fellow traveler who I'm telling this to, and somehow magically their compassion for me turns into my compassion for me. Step 5 is also a collaborative effort between me, my fellow traveler, and my higher power to illuminate the most troublesome patterns of my insanity. My path for growth is further clarified by step 5. I start getting clarity in step 4. Further clarification happens in step 5. Step 6 for me was profound. Becoming willing to let go of my character defects was very challenging. I like the way Cher puts it with character defenses, because that's what they feel like. They were defending me. They were protecting me. Those defects felt like survival strategies, and quite frankly, they were. They just didn't work very well. What will happen to me, to my life, if I let these strategies go? Willingness turned out to be the stark realization that my survival strategies weren't working anyway. I mean, what was the big deal to letting them go? Because they weren't working anyway. I guess it made me feel like I was doing something, but they certainly weren't working for me. Pretending to be in control through these strategies is not the same thing as actually being in control. I pretended at being in control. And it didn't work very well at all. And to me, this is a deeper level, the lessons of step 3 at a much deeper level about letting go of this control, because it's not working anyway. I mean, you see that in pages 60 through 64 all the way through, all the ridiculous things we do, and it never works out, but we just try harder, like the big book says. Step 7. Now, initially, I thought all I had to do with step 7 was just to ask my higher power to remove my character defects, and I would sit back and let my higher power do the heavy lifting. And that turned out not to be how it worked for me. First, I had to ask my higher power to help me become aware of my defects in real time, catch myself doing that stuff in real time. Then I asked for clarity about how these defects are hurting myself and others. What am I doing here? What am I doing here? How is this affecting them? How is it affecting me? And then I had to ask for guidance on how to do it differently in real time. You know, that moment where your mouth is open, you're getting ready to say something stupid is about ready to come out of your mouth. And it's that little pause they always talk about in meetings, that pause. And then you can kind of close your mouth and let whatever was going to come out just stay in there. That's usually what mine is just close your mouth and don't say anything. I had to be willing to fail and then try again. Try something new. If it failed, pick myself back up and try again. And there's a quote that I really like that I think speaks to this a lot from Michael Jordan. And he says, I succeeded because I was willing to fail. And I think that that's true for me in step 7, because I have to try a lot of different stuff. I get guidance from my higher power to try some different things, and I get to see what works and what doesn't. And I come back around for more feedback and debriefing from my higher power and try it all again. I don't necessarily get it right the first, the 10th, or the 100th time. I just have to keep trying. There's that, I think it's a Japanese proverb about fall 7, rise 8. I really like that. It's very simple. You fall down, you get back up. You fall down, you get back up. And I've learned that there's no shame and no humiliation in falling as long as I get back up. Step 8, becoming willing to make amends was all about forgiveness for me. I did not become willing until I was able to forgive them and myself. People on my resentment and fears list had truly hurt me. They had truly hurt me. I wasn't making it up. They had actually done these things to me. But until I was willing to forgive them for what they had done and forgive myself for what I had done in reaction to them, there was no way I was going to be willing to make amends until I could do that. Sometimes we make the mistake of doing that spiritual bypass I talked about a day or two ago, where we dress up our forgiveness in some kind of self-righteous spirituality, and we sort of jump over the work of what we need to do in order to forgive, proclaim that we have forgiven, and we try and move on. And that one doesn't work for me. Forgiveness for me involves understanding, empathy, and compassion for those who have hurt me. And it has to be done without an air of superiority. And that was a big one for me. It's a lot easier to forgive people when you're doing it out of a sense of superiority and they didn't know better, or they're not working a program, or whatever it is we tell ourselves. So it's about doing it from a place of shared humanity, not superiority. Step 9 for me, again, making amends is about this shared humanity. We are all doing the best we can in life, and sometimes our best is not very good. I've had a lot of not very good best days, and so has everyone around me, because we're human. But the difference is we take responsibility for our actions. We say it out loud. We take responsibility for it. We own up to our mistakes, and we try to make it right as best we can. I want to live in integrity with my values and continue the process of truly living them. One of my most basic values is love, and tolerance is my code. That is one of my most basic values, and I want to live it. I do better with love than tolerance. I can run into problems with tolerance. I'm very intolerant of intolerance. So step 10 is graduate level spirituality to me. The work of steps 4 through 9 on a much deeper level, because it's all the time, every day, in the moment. To me, this step is summed up on page 90 of the AA 12 and 12, where it says, it is a spiritual axiom that every time we are disturbed, no matter what the cause, there is something wrong with us. Now, that doesn't mean that the reason for our upset isn't valid. That's not what that's saying. It just means we need to do something for ourselves because we are upset. It's just that we have to work through, with the help of our higher power, why we are allowing a person, place, thing, or situation to emotionally control us, to rule our inner world. Why are we allowing that person to do that? And Bill W. would tell us it's about emotional dependency. And we will be talking a lot about that tomorrow in our talk on emotional sobriety. Step 11, my continued personal and spiritual growth depend on this step. I see this step as where I work on my relationship with my higher power, where I get that needed capital P power that the big book talks about. We can't do it because we don't have the needed power. And this is where we get the needed power with a capital P, is step 11. It's where I strengthen my relationship with my higher power. It is my spiritual gym. My relationship, the quality of my relationship with my higher power dictates how well I'm going to be able to work the rest of the program. That relationship has to be completely honest, two-way, and unconditional. My higher power has to love me unconditionally, and I need to love my higher power unconditionally. I don't want to set any conditions on my relationship with my higher power. I don't want my relationship with my higher power to be transactional. I want it to be a truly loving relationship. Nobody's getting anything out of anybody in this relationship. We're just here for each other. And that's the way I want that relationship to go. Step 12 reminds me of my responsibilities regarding other people. Most of the steps are an inside job, right? We're focusing back on ourselves and we're doing internal work. But step 12 reminds us that we have a responsibility to interact with others using the spiritual principles we've learned. And we have a responsibility to help our fellows along the path, to give freely what we have so freely been given, right? That's the quote or something like it. This is deep shit, people. If we really choose to work it that way, and we don't choose to skim across the surface, this is very transformational work if we want to work it that way. We don't have to, but the choice is always there, and I would recommend it. All right, let's take a look at our question. All right, today, okay, so here's the question. What do you believe is at the root of your addiction? For me, it was control, a need to control. What direction does this point you in for your personal and spiritual growth? I'll set a timer for 5 minutes and we'll meet back here and do some sharing.
Thanks for recovering with us.